we've been doing this since like PS3 era, where you buy a brand new game, you put it in your console, you have to download the game data to your console. You can't just play the game just by putting it in your console. So I want to talk real quickly about Switch 2 with the game key cards, because I think there's been some misinformation and a lot of misunderstanding about what game key cards are, what they mean for gaming, and why it may not be as big as a deal as people say it is. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this practice, I'll explain it the best I can. You buy a physical game from your retailer and it says this is a game key card. You need to download additional data, whether it's 50 gigabytes, 60 gigabytes, whatever. And once you put it in your console, you download the game to your internal memory, and you can play that game as long as the cartridge is inserted into your Switch 2. If you then want to take that game and give it to a friend or family member, to borrow, they can put the cartridge into their Switch 2, download the game data to their internal memory, and they can then play that copy of whether it's Street Fighter 6 or the Hitman game. As long as they have the cartridge in hand, they can play the data of that game on their Switch 2. Just like you won't be able to play that game if you don't have your cartridge with you. You have to get it back from your friend or family member after you let them borrow it, and you can play it on your Switch 2. Now, we've been doing this since like PS3 era, where you buy a brand new game, you put it in your console, you have to download the game data to your console. You can't just play the game just by putting it in your console. That's what the game key cards are basically doing. You have to download this data onto your Switch 2 for you to play it indefinitely. You'll still need the cartridge inserted even though you have the data downloaded to your console. It's the same thing with PS3, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series. We've been doing this for a while, okay? But there are some games on Switch 2 that won't need a game key card download. Primarily the Switch first-party games, Switch 2 first-party games, will most likely not be game key card for the most part. Bravely Default, I believe, is technically a first-party Nintendo game that is a game key card. But to basically explain that part briefly as well is, if you don't remember on Switch 1, you had some games that were just a digital code in the box, and some games that said partial data on the cartridge. You need to download the additional data requiring like 32 gigabytes or more on your memory to download. Those were games like NBA 2K, the Assassin's Creed games, the Mega Man games, the BioShock collection. And the reason for that is game cartridges on Switch 1, and mind you, keep in mind, game cartridges apparently cost more to manufacture than an actual disc, alright, so keep that in mind. But the Switch 1 cartridges had two sizes, 16 gigabyte cards and 32 gigabyte cards. Nintendo, being the guys who own these cards, would put their first party games on the larger 32 gigabyte cards, maybe even larger ones if they had some secret ones they weren't telling anybody about. But games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, they were all on the 32 gigabyte card in its entirety, so you wouldn't have to download any data of the game to play them. Maybe a software update you would need here and there. But when it came to third-party developers, the reason why you had to download their games additionally with the internet from what the cartridge had is because there's something called Switch tax. If you've been with Nintendo Switch for the last 8 years, you might be familiar with the term Switch tax. If you're not, it's Nintendo charging their developers more money to obtain the 32 gigabyte cartridges so they can put the game in its entirety or majority of the game onto those cards. And developers like 2K or even Capcom in some cases would say, I'm going to save money and only buy the 16 gigabyte cartridges, and I'll have the remainder of my game as a download over the internet for the consumer. And that's basically what we've seen on PS5, PS4, Series X, Xbox One, and it's going to be the same with the game key card on Switch 2, okay? With the Switch 2, these cartridges are now set to be about 64 gigabytes in space. So you have games like Mario Kart World and Metroid Prime 4 and Donkey Kong Bonanza. From what we're being told, those games will be in its entirety on the 64 gigabyte card. But then you have games like Street Fighter 6 and the Hitman game they're releasing on release. Those require 50 to 60 gigabytes of download because most likely those developers did the same thing. They're going to save money by not paying the Switch tax on the larger cartridge card, and they're going to buy the lower size cartridge and make you download the remainder of the game onto your console. We do also see some games like Bravely Default that is a first party game that is also a game key card download, so we don't really know why some games will have it, what the sizes are, what the developers are paying. But a company like Cyberpunk, or CD Projekt Red, excuse me, for the Cyberpunk 2077 game, that's not going to be a game key card download. That'll be on the cartridge in its entirety. And I think that's because CD Projekt Red, they paid extra for the 64GB cartridge size, because we know Nintendo Japan is not going to do any favors for anybody. So they paid extra money for the 64GB cartridge. And B, they're not using the build from the PS5 and Series X version of Cyberpunk for the Switch 2. They took the PS4 and Xbox One version of the game, you know, the ones that didn't work, and they put work into that one so it would be playable on Switch 2 with some improvements, but it'll only run at 40 frames per second. It won't be 60, it won't be 120 frames per second. It's 40 frames, excuse me, and it may not be 4K game. It may be, I think maximum was 900 and something p from what I heard. And people who got their hands on Cyberpunk early for a quick demo, they were only limited by CD Projekt Red to play within Dogtown, which is the new area from the Phantom Liberty expansion. And for some reason they weren't allowed to explore the whole city of the game during the demo, which is pretty shady if you ask me, because it seems like they're hiding something with the build of the game. Just like when they first were releasing the game and they gave early copies to all these reviewers, they told them you cannot show any footage of your own that you recorded. You can only show what we provide for you, because we know that those copies of the game, they didn't run unless you had a PS4 Pro and an Xbox One X, and they just barely run back then. The games were buggy, they were glitchy, they would freeze, they would crash. So CD Projekt Red, I want you guys to take it with a grain of salt. If you buy a Switch 2 and you want to buy Cyberpunk, you could be getting a good port that's going to run in handheld and docked on Switch 2, or you could be paying for another buggy, broken port that doesn't work, and they're lying about it. Like I said, we just don't know yet. But in this case, CD Projekt Red most likely paid the extra fee to put Cyberpunk on the Switch 2 larger size cartridges. Unless Nintendo said, hey, we'll do you this favor, give you these cartridges for cheaper cost, we want your game on Switch 2, then that's a different story. But the main point of this video that I want to get into about it was the game key card download. I understand what people are afraid of. If the servers go down and the game key downloads are reliant on the servers, then you won't have access to those games anymore, and you're losing out on game preservation. But we're talking about 8 to 12 years from now, where they're gonna have a Switch 3, and maybe they'll shut down the servers for the store on Switch 2. But I'm pretty sure you can still buy, assuming the PS3 store is shut down, I'm sure you can get a PS3 disc, put it in your console, and still download the data. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. But my main point here is that they're doing this because the games are going to run in 4K. Most of them, not all of them. I'll make a separate video about 4K gaming on Switch. But the games are going to run much better, much bigger, much smoother, and they all just can't fit the entire game on the cartridge unless they want to pay Nintendo the Switch tax to put it on their cartridge. That's why you have to download these games separately from the internet after you insert the cartridge into your console. It's nothing different than what we've been doing on PS5 and PS4. You can still let friends and family borrow your game. You can still trade it into GameStop. Nothing has changed. The only difference that's changed is the pricing of games. Now we're seeing games going from $40, which is like Bravely Default, I think it's like 40 or 50 for the new Bravely Default releasing, up to $80 for Mario Kart. In some places, $90 for Mario Kart. So we are seeing prices increase of those, but game key cards is not the end of the world. I think there's just been a lot of misconception, and if I'm proven wrong at the release in about a month, by all means I'll be proven wrong. But it is, I get why people are upset about seeing game key card on the box for games like Street Fighter and Hitman and other games as well, but you're not really losing out on anything that you were been doing for PlayStation and Xbox anyway. You're still gonna get to play the game. You can still trade it in. You can still let someone borrow it. It's just so that they can fit the game on the console so it can run, and they're avoiding Switch tax by paying Nintendo a premium for these cards. So hopefully all that makes sense to you. If you have any more questions about it, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to answer questions based on what I know. And I can't wait to see you guys on June 5th on Nintendo Online. I'll be playing that Mario Kart early, not early, but at release. And I'm also going to play some Street Fighter at release as well. So hope to see you guys there online. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel as we push more and more to get 3,000 subscribers. So hopefully this video was informative. I thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye for now.